Culture Pastor.
To start this show, I thought it would be relevant to read a poem.
Okay.
This would be T.S. Eliot's The Little Gidding. It's the last of T.S. Eliot's 4 quartets.
Oh.
And this poem is referenced in the episode that we're discussing today.
I do love me some T.S. Eliot.
Yeah.
Not going to lie.
So here you go. If you'll indulge me.
I will.
What we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from, in every phrase and sentence that is right, where every word is at home, taking its place to support the others. The word neither diffident nor ostentatious, an easy commerce of the old and the new, the common word exact without vulgarity, the formal word precise but not pedantic, the complete consort dancing together. Every phrase and every sentence is an end and a beginning, every poem an epitaph, and any action is a step to the block, to the fire, down the sea's throat, or to an ineligible stone, and that is where we start. We die with the dying. See they depart and we go with them. We are born with the dead. See they return and bring us with them. The moment of the rose and the moment of the yew tree are of equal duration. A people without history is not redeemed from time, for history is a pattern of timeless moments. So while the light fails on a winter's afternoon in a secluded chapel, history is now. And England.
Yeah! Yeah! Go England!
I wish I knew like what he was writing about, T.S. Eliot. But I know from reading that and looking at that, someone in the writer's room at Loki was taking a lot of inspiration from this.
Dare I say, T.S. Eliot had quite the lexicon. The words were not always within my vocabulary context.
I don't always get to say words like ostentatious and pedantic, but when I do, I over-enunciate them.
Someone needs to.
Pedantic.
I'm over here Googling the words. Wait, what does that mean?
Hello, welcome. This is Pop Culture Pastor Watch-Alongs. We watched episode 6, the season finale of season 2 of Loki.
Maybe the series finale.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know where they go from here. There's, no talk. In fact, they've kind of shut down any questions of, is there going to be another season? They're just kind of like, not that we know of. So, yeah.
They left it very open.
I assume this is going to generate a lot of conversation as far as our what's the word I'm looking for? Our observation of what happens in this episode, I guess. What we think is going on. So let's just get into it. Let's get into the recapping. Kind of first of all, broad takeaways on the episode. Do you just have a broad takeaway?
Goosebumps. The goosies, as the kids say.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I'm Dave. Cody's right there.
With the goosies.
And Matt's here as well. Matt, did you have any broad thoughts on just the episode before we get started?
Yeah, I guess I'd say the future of Marvel, to me, it brightened me up. And I want to see where it goes now.
Yeah.
They've hooked me. So
yeah, it's good. It was good. Just broadly, I'll ask you this question before we even get into it. Is this the best narrative loop, so to speak? Is this the best narrative that Marvel has ever done? Is this the best story that they've ever told?
the best Disney Plus.
How about this? For one character, is this the best story they've ever told?
For Disney Plus, I agree with that.
Oh, well, it's not even close. Disney Plus for sure. I think Marvel.
WandaVision was good.
Yeah. But I'm talking about a character. Is this the best they've ever done for one character?
If you go from Thor 1 to Ragnarok, Thor exponentially.
Yep. Thor gets a lot of exposition, I think, in the MCU, which is good.
Otherwise, I don't know.
I would say there's differences between the two. And I'm going to say that it is the best character build and the best look at we've had is through Loki. Because in Thor, and I'm a huge fan of Thor. I got a son named Thor.
He does.
It gave you this, like it built you up, like you just felt it. With Loki, it was a deeper feeling than that. What I was left with, and it's just my opinion, but I think it's the best character we've seen.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at. I think this show is very clever. Season 1 and season 2, the whole thing together, I think it's very clever because the illusion is that this is about some grand story being played out. And really, it's not that at all. This is an intimate story about Loki and about like this journey he's about to make, in discovering his glorious purpose, right? And by the way, big shout out to the makers of this show for titling this episode the very same title of the first episode. They're both titled Glorious Purpose, and I thought that was brilliant. Because as we know, the Ouroboros is the loop is an ongoing factor and narrative point in this story. So yeah, let's just get started. Let's get into the recap of it. It starts with some more genius. This episode, I mean, the whole show really, in the whole season 2, but this episode in particular had some just kind of little brilliant touches. One is the playing of the Marvel logo and the music backwards. That was kind of genius, and really just immediately something so simple. I mean, me and my kids, we were watching it, and it gets you on the edge of your seat instantly, and it's like, oh, okay. It puts you in the right frame of mind to watch something kind of trippy. And what this is. And we get immediately taken back to the loom, which is where we end the last episode. And Loki, we see a little bit of time before Loki obviously time jumps back into himself, that's kind of cool because we see what it looks like from the outer perspective when Loki time slips into himself at a different point in time, which we hadn't seen yet. So he slips into time, and then what we get is like Groundhog Day on quadruple fast forward. Over and over and over again, Loki trying to rush the proceedings to get Victor to move a little faster, to get everyone to come around to their conclusions a little faster. In a way, now when you go back and rewatch, I wonder if this is going to make some of the other episodes less satisfying because now the whole sequence of Victor and the hot chocolate seems to have like an ulterior motive, right? Like, oh, that's why we seemingly stop the episode for a good 5 minutes so Victor can be impressed by the chocolate soup machine, because they knew that this was going to be a thing where they had to present an atmosphere where they were just too relaxed to where it was going. And so we get multiple spaghettyifications over and over. Victor Timely just dying multiple times.
And I was like, hey, it's Reed Richards all over again.
Yes.
Because that's the running gag that we have.
I even wrote in my notes, Reed Richards in bold just for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that part was all very good. And it reminded me of some of the best parts, I joke, but some of the best parts of Groundhog Day. Like, I think some of the most satisfying parts of Bill Murray's Groundhog Day is where he is reliving with purpose. So he hasn't figured out the main purpose, right? Which he figures out at the end, which is to care about someone more than yourself, to love someone. But the fun parts of Groundhog Day is where he starts to get it and he's picking up purpose. And so just in a way that I think that's really the engaging part of Groundhog Day, the movie, this was really engaging. That Loki he hasn't found his glorious purpose, but he is playing and learning about what purpose is in a sense. And that playing over and over again. And I love how we get the SpongeBob, like a few centuries later, like where he's learning everything about the timey-wimey stuff. And he comes back and he's clearly, it's confusing everyone else in the room, but he's like speed typing and he's like telling Ouroboros what this is and Casey, and everyone's very impressed. And he's like finishing everyone's sentences, which is hilarious. Loki he's giving a visual demonstration of Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. But instead of 10,000 hours to become an expert, it took him centuries. I don't know what that means about Loki, but we get that it's centuries. And it's funny because someone actually, is it Mobius? No, it's OB who says, this all seems a bit rushed.
Yeah.
And he's like, only to you. Or no, it's Victor Timely who says, this all seems a bit rushed. And Loki quickly says, only to you. If you stop, you die. He's just constantly, the deadpan that Tom Hiddleston is delivering here is great, because then he's out there, right? He's finally making it down the gangway. He doesn't get spaghettified immediately. And he's like, you're being so brave. Keep going. You're being brave.
The words just now, say this now, say this now,
Yeah.
say this
Now, I told you, don't set that down.
yes.
Don't sit on the gangway. It'll fall off. You're being very brave. All of that was hilarious and so well acted. Like Tom Hiddleston. We're almost to Thanksgiving, and we should all be grateful as Marvel fans, as comic book movie fans, that Tom Hiddleston took the role of Loki, because he's fantastic. It is a bit of a kick in the teeth, a punch in the gut, that he took centuries to pull off this plan, and then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
There's a brief moment that there's hope.
Yeah. Then you get the rug pulled out from you, and he realizes that he's done all that work. Again, Hiddleston's work as an actor is great, because you get the recognition on his face when they're all realizing, oh. And Victor Timely is the one who kind of puts that into words for us as we're seeing the facial recognition of everyone else, where he says, yeah, it can't be done. It's infinitely creating more loops, which means you can't divide by zero. Yeah.
I did message you that
Yeah,
in the
you did.
middle of the episode.
You did, before I started watching. I had no idea what you were talking about.
Oh gosh.
Well, it wasn't a spoiler, because
son of a-
literally there was no context to it.
There wasn't. And I didn't know what you meant until, of course, I was watching the episode, and I was like, oh, there it is. It's like trying to divide by zero. So Cody watched it. I knew Cody had watched it already. Yeah, so he comes to this realization, end of Act 1 of this episode, where this isn't going to work. And then we go to the end of time, right? The Citadel. And it turns into this idea of stopping Sylvie, which, again, the same sort of thing plays out. We're looping. He Who Remains is there, and he's just kind of, being really cocky in the background as all this is happening. And Sylvie says, if you want to stop me, you'll have to kill me. And at this point, I thought, well, yeah, that's where this episode is at. He's going to be asked to make a choice. And
Yeah, because she kept saying it over and over.
Yeah.
You kept repeating it in each one.
this was one of the
I'll
more...
see you soon.
Yeah. She keeps killing him. We hear him say, I'll see you soon, over and over and over again. And I think that was something that the filmmakers wanted us to kind of pound into us, that, the looming threat of this is not over. The whole segment here where he's talking to He Who Remains, because he just keeps going through the loop. Obviously, this isn't working either, until finally, out of frustration, he turns to He Who Remains. Is like, are you just going to sit there and let her kill you over and over again? Like, aren't you going to do anything?
Right.
And
That's where I was that whole run.
I know,
I'm
I was
like,
saying it with
he's
him.
just hanging out.
yeah. And then it gets really interesting, because then he starts talking back. Once he realizes that now, okay, you've done this before. He's like, how many times have you been at this? And then when there's a conversation imminent, he freezes Sylvie and then does away with her completely. And that's like, I get to the end of my chair at this point. I'm like, oh, okay. It's some important stuff's going to get talked about here.
You haven't figured out how to pause time yet?
Yeah. And they're talking about it. And that's when Loki, in the middle of it, quotes the T.S. Eliot poem. We die with the dying. We're born with the dead. And then the realization comes that this is Jonathan Majors, obviously, and a super talented actor. And I don't know how this story is going to play out with him. I don't know what's going to happen. But in this scene, you get to see him and Tom Hiddleston going at it. And it's like some of the great back and forth acting scenes that you like. I always think of Crimson Tide with Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington. It's just, it's two heavyweights going at it. And there's this masterful moment. So Jonathan Majors has been playing He Who Remains this whole time is this kind of, he's cocky, he's aloof. And he's giving the impression that he's got it all under control. And just like people out in the real world who are overcompensating, you see a chink in the armor when Loki stops time, and he says, "What makes you think this is the first time I've had this conversation?" And you can see like the look on the face that Jonathan Majors gives you is just perfect because he's still trying to leave up the veneer of aloofness and cockiness and I've got this under control, but something about his face, there's a vulnerability in it where you're like, okay, yeah, he's internally, he's frightened now. He doesn't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And I thought that scene where I don't know if we get any real answers in that scene.
We get all the answers.
Oh, do we?
None of the answers at the same time.
See, now when I saw, you said the fear, I saw fear and relief.
Maybe.
They're two powerful actors. And my brain was going, he's finally found his one that he can let go with. Is how I felt. Maybe I'm wrong on that. That Kang could let go. Like, oh, you're the one.
You think so?
I do.
I don't think he thinks...
So
I did not read that. I feel like it's all false bravado, although maybe not false. His expectation and his experience says you can't win. I really think he's in a place where he thinks Loki can't win. In fact, he says that. He says, you lose.
So I think part of it is that like, oh, he has actually put forth all this time, effort, and energy that like, okay, this is the Avenger or the person that is going to be the one that sees the big picture because he's gone through all this with me. And so I kind of got that type of relief from Jonathan Majors in that moment that like, oh, he's going to see the logic that we really need.
And maybe that's more of what
the divine timeline, the sacred timeline to stay intact. It's the only way. It really is. And well, it might not be the only way. I do love when Majors shifts to kind of mocking Victor Timely.
Oh man.
And does the bumbling and stumbling of words, and I'm like, ooh, this is good.
Yeah, Loki says that it was a scaling problem. That's what Victor said, and he's like, "Oh, Victor, he said that. He said it was a scaling problem." Like he's mocking him. Yeah, And all of that was just genius and brilliant acting on Jonathan Majors' part. That whole scene was amazing. It ends with the equation written on the wall, and in a way, I think Cody's right. He understands the equation. So Loki, the whole episode up to this point is to him getting to the point where he understands that He Who Remains is kind of right. That this is the only way and this is the way it's set up. But then he says, I'll change the equation. And then he slips through time again. He goes back to the time theater, right? Where he first is interrogated by Mobius. And there's at first, On first watch, I've watched this multiple times now. On first watch, I was like, why is this scene in here? I didn't have anything written down for this scene.
Oh, I did.
Oh, I did.
Okay, go ahead. You go through your stuff first.
Let Matt go first.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
All
Matt.
right. So Mobius was brilliant in this, and he says, "How do you choose who?" Loki says to him, "How do you choose who lives and who dies?" You know, he asks. He's going back and just he's needing someone to bounce this off of because he's like, I'm stuck with Kang's thought of this, either the timeline or destruction. That's it, and I need to get outside of that box. And Mobius does an amazing job. That our actor here, does an amazing job walking through that. And you can see it click. It says, we're talking about, I think, Ravonna. She knew the hard thing to do was the thing that had to be done. And by hard, I mean impossible. There's no comfort. You just choose your burden.
Yeah. So Mobius tells the story, which is clearly him.
Yes.
Where he doesn't prune a kid and it causes havoc and it results in death.
Right.
Because the kid grows up to be someone bad. And Ravonna is the one who ends up pruning him, but it was too late. That the damage was done, and so all of that was stuff. He does this a couple times, by the way, Loki, in the episode where he intentionally slips to someone because he needs some gaps filled in. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, go ahead.
And he says most purpose is more about burden than glory. Mm-hmm. And you can see Loki's. I mean, Tom Hiddleston's a great actor, and you keep paying him back to him, and you see his face. And you can see the
I'm gonna come back to that when we get into deeper themes. But hold on to those things he says there. Most purpose is more burden than glory. There's no comfort. You just choose your burden. We'll come back to that.
So, I mean, as I'm watching that I'm like, oh, this is leading to he's pulling a certain person. He will. Mm-hmm. That I'll mention deeper themes, but like I wasn't sure how we were going to get to that moment, but like he knows it. Yeah. He's sacrificing.
Yeah. It's another great scene between two amazing actors, and they both pull it off really well. Then we flash back to Loki and Sylvie, right? So he goes back there, and I think at first you're like, oh, he is going to try and kill her, right? And she repeats the line, "You're going to have to kill me." And then instead, I can't remember what it is he says that kind of gets her off track. He says something to her where he calms her down a little bit, but immediately he shifts back to where Obi's hideout on the branch timeline,
yes.
Which I'm in California, I think, and he asks her a straight up question, and she says, even down there, it's full of death, destruction, and injustice. So she's, of course, the discussion is which timelines. Loki's still thinking about the pruning and how the greater good, and Sylvie's still fighting for everybody, right? And she says, even though down there it's full of death, destruction, and injustice, she's still fighting for, you give them free will.
She has survived several apocalypses, her words, not mine, and that free will still gives you a chance, where you don't really have a choice or a chance with just pruning and having one sacred timeline.
Yeah.
And I like she says, sometimes it's okay to destroy something. Remember, she goes to that and with the free will, and they're sort of bantering back and forth, and she's saying it doesn't let them have that choice. Yeah. You don't get to choose that, but it clicks something else in Loki.
So literally at that moment, this is the second time I messaged Dave during the episode, and I only send one word: Ragnarok.
Yeah, what was your point with that?
you had to destroy something to give it hope in a future. And Thor was willing to destroy all of Asgard to give the Asgardians a potential of hope.
So they're playing around with a lot of Norse mythology here, because in Norse mythology, where Thor and Loki and Odin and all that comes from, Ragnarok is not the end of all things. It's a cycle. It's an Ouroboros. It literally. So in Norse mythology, there's a snake described as going around the world that's eating its own tail, right?
Right.
And so like all of Norse mythology, the lowercase g gods that are living in that story, it's all a cycle of death and rebirth.
Right, like the Phoenix.
Yeah. And so they're you can't undersell just how good a job they've done with the Norse mythology, and in some ways doing a better job than the comics did at times with Thor and Loki and all them, because Thor and Loki's story in the movies has always, and probably some thanks should be given to Kenneth Branagh and the directors of the producers of that very first movie, because they never went light on the Asgard stuff. And therefore it's just a part of their story. And so all of this fits into it perfectly. At the end of the conversation with Sylvie, he says that there's a hope that you can replace that thing with something better. He's saying, is it okay to destroy? And then he moves on to replace, right? And really their whole conversation's about hope. The chance. That's what Sylvie is saying too. It's that even though this world is full of death and destruction and injustice, what if there's the hope? This one chance that you can make things better. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later too when we get to deeper themes, because that is a very spiritual thing.
And I love the way Tom Hiddleston, you quoted it, but he says, if, he repeats if. And just like he's realizing what he has to do.
Yeah. Then we're back at the loom, and Loki is now using definitive statements. I know what I want. I know what kind of god I need to be. And so we see Loki just kind of marching out onto the gangway without any sort of protection, which we assume something about his Asgardian / frost giant lineage is helping him here in this regard.
Which throughout all of season 2, anytime we've been around the loom, I'm like, why aren't we having Loki do this? He's not human.
I was thinking the same thing. I was doing the same thing. Like, wait a minute. What?
That is the only question. That is the only little... this story's magnificent. Like, I thought this episode was great in the narrative. That's the only little hole, I think. Because that was the first thing I thought too. Now, like, wait a minute. This guy been letting Victor die over and over and over again. But I guess you could fit that into of like the God of stories. Like that that maybe that he was always that way anyways. And he just thought Victor Timely was supposed to be the hero. He thought that that's the narrative that was supposed to go. And there's, we do that. I think we do that intrinsically sometimes as humans, where we're in a situation where everybody's like, okay, what should we do? We should do this. Who's going to do this? And maybe we think in our minds, well, I could do that, but it seems right that it should be this guy, right? We do that.
So, like, I'd go back to the Chicago Bulls of the 90s. Like, we all talk about MJ's the guy. He's the one that has to do this. John Paxson and Steve Kerr make 2 of the biggest shots in their runs.
That's right.
To win the game and the championship. So,
and Michael Jordan delivered those passes that he needed to make.
Yes.
And in those moments, he maybe is doing what Loki did previously, where he's like, well, this is Steve Kerr's moment. It's got to be him.
Where, like, typically we would say, MJ has to shoot this.
MJ also chose his own number several times.
Yes.
It's got to be me. These losers can't hack it.
Byron Russell, eat court.
So, yeah, we do this. And I think we can identify with Loki in those situations, even though it feels like we all thought the same thing. Like, oh, come on, man. You could have done that the whole time. So yes, he goes out. He basically destroys the loom himself. So the loom, as we're to understand, is a failsafe that He Who Remains says protects the sacred timeline. It's a failsafe that should the TVA had stopped pruning, that the loom was just there to collect the timelines and then destroy them, right? Mm-hmm. So if the TVA fails, the loom blows up, destroys variant timelines, you start over, it destroys the TVA in the process. He Who Remains says, it's easy to rebuild. No problem. Loki essentially becomes the loom. Am I reading that right? Is the implication that Loki decides which timelines survive?
I think he changes the whole thing.
Yes.
He clearly chooses timelines. Though.
Did you
he
know
can't hold them all. Right?
But
He gathers what his hands can hold, and he brings them together at the end on the throne. That's not all the timelines. You see him in the background. What's the implication of that? Beyond it just looks cool.
I think it was him grabbing all the timelines, because I'm not even going to try to say the sacred tree in Norse mythology.
Yggdrasil.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yggdrasil.
was, by the way, that was awesome.
Yes.
But so there are main timelines, but then they're splintering out, just like there's main branches that then have twigs and more branches coming off of them. And so I do think the implication is he is holding all the timelines together. And I wonder, just because okay, so we get the top of the tree, we get the roots of the tree, as above, so below. Is the implication that some of these are very more positive good and very evil negative, or it just looks really cool in this picture?
Yeah, and your brain can go. So I may be wrong on my thoughts on this, but when he walks out and blows up the loom, did you notice the timelines? And maybe I'm wrong, but he spaghettifies the timelines. That's what it looks like to me.
They're all
he
dead.
destroys. It's not just that he moves the timelines, that he destroys them, that they're dead. And when he touches them, he's bringing them back to life for what he's building.
Maybe you're right. I don't know. So okay, the whole entire last scene is done brilliantly. It's highly effective. There's the building music into the glorious purpose of it all. You get goosebumps when you watch it, when he sits down on the throne, and there's all this, but they don't explain it for you. That's not what this scene's about. That's not their intent. Their intent is to just show his story coming full circle, him getting his throne that he felt he was destined to get. In fact, Sylvie, off camera, when it's happening, says he's getting his chance, right? She's speaking directly to the idea of he's destined for a throne. But nothing is explained. But we'll come back to that in deeper themes, I think. But I think what needs to be said is that scene was highly effective, amazingly emotional scene. But the point of it was that story looping to its conclusion, and not really to tell us anything about what's going on or what's going to come later.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
And something I just happened to notice was when he's walking out on the platform and he's being changed to Prime. Prime Loki or
God of Stories,
God
Loki,
of Stories,
yeah.
right? And then the crown. If you look at the crown, I don't know why I noticed this last night, but the crown appears to be formed from the rock that the Citadel at the end of time is made from. So that's because that rock I think, has some substantial basis to Avenger Prime and
but it's got the kintsugi design to it, which has been a theme throughout since the first season, where kintsugi is the Japanese custom of repairing broken pottery glass with gold. You tie it together with gold, and the whole point of it is that something broken can be beautiful still.
And even better than it was before.
And even better, yes. So, if you look closely in that scene, it is made of the Citadel, basically, and it's still got the kintsugi theme going on in his crown.
Absolutely.
We switch to the after. The TVA is operating. They seem to be aware of everything that happened, right? And they're chasing down He Who Remains variants. That's kind of delivered in the epilogue there. They even make a reference to the Kang in Quantum Mania. 616 adjacent.
Yeah. Although we got him for now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not a forever thing, but he's handled for now.
Mobius leaves. He's going to go try out life on the timeline. And you get this beautiful little scene with him and Sylvie where he says, I think I'll just let time pass for a while, which is kind of was really emotional. And you think, oh, yeah, he's going to go. He's making the same choice essentially that the whole show is about. This thing that caring for other people, this burden, so to speak, is it worth it?
And a lot of people on the interwebs have said that this is the moment that Loki can see old Owen Wilson, because Mobius is out on one of the timelines, and so him being like, I might just wait here for a little bit and let time pass, is them sharing a moment.
Well, and we get a flash of Loki's face on the throne where he appears to be emotional. And you assume, yes, that he is emotional seeing his friends. Loki has transcended, if you will, to love. He's transcended to the place of, oh, I'm going to care for people even if that's a burden, right? And that's the whole choice. We'll get back to that in deeper themes. What was good about the episode, Cody? Very quickly.
So it is Tom Hiddleston and Jonathan Majors.
Yeah.
And I'll throw in Sylvie.
Yeah. All the acting, I agree, was phenomenal. Matt, what's good about this episode?
That was one of the things. So a couple of good. The ensemble of actors. We just have an amazing group of actors here. Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston and Jonathan Majors. All of them are amazing actors, and that made this show. That's why it is what it is. And then the other good thing I would say is, and maybe I'm being crazy here, but it sets up an amazing future for Secret Wars, the assembling of the Prime Avengers, and I'm playing a lot of conjecture, and I'm just, it's,
yeah, because my response to that is, does it?
I know we sort of talked, yeah, and you made me think, but I wanted to say what I thought, but
yeah. I don't think that was their purpose at all. And some of the things the creators of the show have said, Cody, you sent me a story that the creator of this second season of Loki said, oh, Marvel was great. They just let us do our thing. They didn't put anything. They didn't give us anything that we had to have in here as far as the ongoing story. So does it? I don't know. I don't know.
I'm holding out hope.
And I'm gonna save that because I'm gonna save that to the end.
Are they really smart in just like, we're playing you for fools and we'll put out false information?
Maybe. But we have to evaluate where we're at now. That's what we're doing, and I'll talk about that here in a bit. Was there any things not so good?
There could have been more Ki Hai Kwan.
Yeah, the character of OB is really sort of inconsequential, made inconsequential by the ending. Although they would argue that no, him and He Who Remains are the Ouroboros, kind of. They're their own Ouroboros, that they needed each other to help devise the whole plan to begin with, I guess. Is that what we're saying? I don't know. I feel like OB as a character gets short shrifted a little bit, but that's a minor gripe because he's so wonderful and you're just grateful for everything you get from Ki Hai Kwan at this point. Can you believe we lived without him for so long?
I can't.
I just can't believe it. I can't believe that this Academy Award winning brilliant actor was on the sidelines for so long. all this time wasted.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's much bad. I don't think I have anything as far as the episode of the story goes. It was really a perfect ending and story narrative as far as the story of Loki goes. I thought it was great.
Slash a great beginning.
And I agree. I have nothing negative takeaway from it.
Yeah.
I don't.
So let's talk about deeper themes. Obviously, they're playing around with a lot of spiritual stuff here.
So I hinted at when Loki is talking to Mobius in the time theater, that it was at that moment I'm like, oh, he's for sure sacrificing his wants, his desires. He's pulling a Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was the moment that I'm like, this is where it ends.
Yeah.
Or begins.
Biblically speaking, as we're both pastors, the theme of this entire episode, the theme of Loki's entire arc is he's broken. It causes him to be broken towards other people. And it causes him to do what broken people do, which is, if I could just get this, if I could just get this power, if I could just get this glory, then everything will be okay. And over again, he either fails to attain it or he actually wins occasionally and it still doesn't work out. There's something unfulfilling about it all. And this is the full loop to the story where he figures out that caring for others, although it's a burden, Jesus says, my yoke is light.
Yes.
So something about the caring for other people, loving other people enough to set your life down, which seems like a burden to the world, is actually the thing that makes us the most glorious.
No greater love has a man than the one who's willing to lay down his life for a friend.
Yeah. And that is like, look, if you can't see the Jesus imagery in this story, I don't know what to tell you. Because it is on full display, even to the point where Loki, in a kind of reverse Jesus, takes his throne to be alone forever, right? Whereas in the God story, the Christian story, God leaves the throne of all glory and power to come be with us, right? What does Loki want more than anything? He wants his friends.
He doesn't want to be alone anymore.
He doesn't want to be alone. And in this instance, Jesus does the same thing. Jesus is God who comes to earth to be with his friends, to be with the ones he loves, but then sacrifices himself for the greater good, for the survival of his friends, to go back to his throne.
See, and I even sort of felt when he was my thought went to Jesus in the garden a little bit, and Loki walking through this in his thoughts of, take this cup from me, I don't, but I get
when he's realizing what he has to do.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
I agree. Did the story writers pull this straight from the Bible?
They always do. They don't even know it. That's the crazy part.
His sacrifice gives life to all.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's only one missed opportunity in this whole thing. I should have put this on things that are not so good. What do they do at the end of all their stuff, Marvel? At the end of the credits, Loki will return. Why was that not there? That so should have been there. Even if you have no plans to bring him back, that was the obvious imagery that should have been there. He's coming back, right?
Well, especially with all this being looped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That, like, even if you don't revisit anything to do with Loki, he technically is going to have to go through all this again and keep doing a cycle.
Okay. Now, let's get to, before we give our ratings of the episode. Disclaimer, the Loki narrative is fantastic. This episode is amazing in story. The multiverse narrative, on the other hand, is a steaming pile of dung.
Oh.
Absolute trash. So I'm sitting there at the end of the episode. Listen, remember my disclaimer. I'm going to give this episode a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
I'm already telling you that. I'm telling you that ahead of time so you can understand where I'm at here. At the end of the episode, after the first time I watched it, I'm sitting there, the credits are running, and my daughter says, well, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know, because there were conflicting emotions. One, I've just watched a great story, which we cannot take for granted because phase 4 and phase 5 have largely turned into a dumpster fire on some occasions. And I'm not going to complain about a good narrative. Okay. This was a great story. However, the first however many movies up to Endgame are called what, Cody? What do they call those as a collective? It's a saga.
The Infinity Saga.
The Infinity Saga, which they kind of dubbed after it was complete, right?
Okay.
Yeah. They I don't remember anyone calling it the Infinity Saga, maybe right before Endgame came out. It was a late dubbing of the entire first 3 phases or whatever. Somewhere very early on in phase 4, there was a comic convention and Kevin Feige rolls out on stage with a hat and an announcement of future projects. And the hat says the Multiverse Saga. And he announces it. He makes this big announcement. We're now in the Multiverse Saga. This was after Loki season 1. So everybody was super excited about everything. And so they dubbed it the Multiverse Saga. So I don't want you to get it twisted. I am not upset with no reason. You dubbed it an ongoing story.
Okay.
Now, let's go through. I have now a list in order of every project starting after the Infinity Saga. That is, Matt is like, oh, we're in it for the long haul. Yeah, you just sit tight. I'm going to get through this because,
Yes, sir.
Listen, Cody.
I currently have no beef, but here we go.
If you were, I know, and I know some people aren't going to understand. This is why I'm talking about it, because I want to explain this. If you remember our episode on the Multiverse of Madness,
I do.
I liked the movie, right? I gave it a good score, but there was something about it, and I couldn't quite put it into words. There was something about it I was disappointed with, and I didn't really have the words to say it. Now I do. All right, here we go. I Am Groot doesn't really count. Black Widow was the first movie. It was more of an addendum to the Infinity Saga, whatever. Loki's the first real thing. It ends with the dawn of the Multiverse Saga. That's the excitement Kevin Feige was working off of when he makes this announcement. Then we get What If, which is all about multiple variants and storylines going on out there in the multiverse. Then we get WandaVision. WandaVision isn't necessarily multiversal, except for we understand there's something important about Scarlet Witch. Remember, there's all that talk in that series about her being a Nexus being.
Right.
Which are operatives in the multiverse who are operating across alternate timelines. Excuse me. Then we get Shang-Chi, which isn't really a multiversal movie, but we do get the end credits scene with the 10 rings and them discussing what they are and how they're a beacon. And we get this little hint, at least, of something. But if I may describe an ongoing theme here, we're getting hints, we're getting breadcrumbs, but nothing's tying together. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, not multiversal at all. Eternals, not really multiversal at all. Spider-Man No Way Home. Okay, this is where it starts, right? This is where the lead up for that movie, we're like, oh, we're finally getting some real ramifications of what we saw at the end of Loki. And we do. Except it's really less about that and more about Doctor Strange's stupid spell, right? So Doctor Strange makes a stupid spell because he's being stupid. There's no way around this, by the way. Doctor Strange is an idiot in this storyline. He's an absolute moron. And he's, to be fair, he doesn't know the events of Loki. Why would he? But we get all this multiversal shenanigans. And then at the end of the movie, the end credit scene at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home is basically the trailer for Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Now, here's the movie where I said I couldn't put it into words what my problem was. I can now. Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, wonderful story, from start to finish. It's a narrative in and of itself in the movie. It has multiverse in the title. Does not really connect to Spider-Man No Way Home other than he's having dreams and you assume that he caused it. That he caused part of the problems. Although, as a viewer, we're led to believe on our own assumptions that, well, he still doesn't know about the events of Loki. And that has some factor in it too. But no tangible connection by the makers of the story connected to any of the other things.
Okay.
Other than Doctor Strange is in it. It's Scarlet Witch. She's the major player here. And she should be fine. The story's the story. Hawkeye, no multiversal connection. Moon Knight, no real multiversal connection.
Although there is a Kang-looking sarcophagus.
There's Easter eggs. I'll get to that. I will address the Easter eggs. Black Panther, no multiversal story. She-Hulk, oh my gosh. Even if there was, I wouldn't give it the credit because that show is an abomination.
She was breaking the fourth wall, Dave.
Yeah. Miss Marvel, she's traveling through time with the Bengals. There's a connection. It's not really super implicit. Again, no real connection. Thor, Love and Thunder, no multiversal connection.
Loved it.
Werewolf by Night, no connection. Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, amazing, delightful, but no multiversal collection.
I like to think Kevin Bacon is a Nexus being.
Yes.
Quantum Mania. Then we get to Quantum Mania. And we're thinking, okay, finally, we're already frustrated by this point, by the way. At least I was.
I'm not.
Because of the lack of connection.
I haven't felt it yet. You're frustrated?
Oh, yeah. Just a little. Quantum Mania comes. We get the big bad. The implication is this is the one. He's Kang the Conqueror, and he's beaten by the ant family and giant ants. Okay? We are a year into your multiversal saga. You've introduced your major villain, and he's a chump. Okay? He Who Remains, they did a much better job of making He Who Remains formidable and kind of scary. In fact, we feel it in this season where Loki says he's frightening. Yeah, he is. Kang the Conqueror, not so much. Not so much. Guardians 3, no multiversal connection. It brings us to this series. And what I want to say is everything about the multiverse saga is tied together with Easter eggs and Easter eggs alone. Why should... And let's discuss the falling clout of Marvel and the viewership. Loki, the season of Loki, even though it's probably the best Disney Plus show ever, the best season of Disney Plus content ever, is going to be one of the least watched. Why? Because you have strung us along with Easter eggs and breadcrumbs, and it's all binge smoke and mirrors. None of this is connected. You have not tied it together in any way. Why should anyone be interested in the multiverse? You haven't connected it.
Oh, I'm ready to take this one down.
Why should anyone care about Kang? Why should anyone care about He Who Remains or Kang or any of his variants? You have not given them any gravitas. He Who Remains is the one that comes closest. He's in 2 episodes of 2 seasons. And here's my problem. You've given us 2 years of content with no definitive connection. Oh. And it feels like Marvel is trying to divide by 0. It does not work. You want to know why people are less interested? Because you're doing a crappy job of stringing us along. And this is what comic books do well, right? This is why I love comic books. So don't even get me started on the whole like, well, why does everything have to tie together? Because you're making comic book movies. Comic books don't just string you along with Easter eggs. They're interconnected. Some of the major events in comic books are summer crossovers where across 50 titles, they're telling a story from beginning to end, and it's all connected, and they do a fine job with many different creators, many different writers, many different illustrators. Like, look.
They stay true.
You're doing a poor job of the multiverse saga. The multiverse saga is trash right now.
Okay, I disagree wholeheartedly.
Go ahead.
Okay, phase 1. When does it begin, you might ask? The year 2008. Endgame 2019. If you had told me that the Infinity Saga had anything to do with it for the first 5 years, I would have been like, what?
It
and
didn't.
I would
It
have
didn't.
had that SpongeBob looking like a chicken meme going on.
Let me respond. The difference is they didn't. They were just telling stories. The Infinity Saga wasn't a thing until later, and they didn't make movies like that until later. When they started, the first end credit scene with Thanos was a joke. It was an Easter egg, and then someone said, hey, what if we started pointing them this way? What if we started leading to this? The difference here is Kevin Feige walked out on stage and labeled this the Multiverse Saga. And if you're gonna label this Infinity Gauntlet, Atlantis Attacks, the Evolutionary Wars, Inferno, any of the great Marvel crossovers of all time, you better deliver.
Okay, so I used to be a tree trimmer. This is a true story. Whenever there's ice and snow and all that sort of stuff,
I hate this parable already.
it damages trees. And usually not the whole tree at first. It just breaks off a limb. But where that limb was, it affects the whole tree later down the road. Mm-hmm. So right now, we're just seeing one little limb, one little branch. 5 years from now, I think you're going to look back and be like, oh, this really was all connected. We just needed time. Time is one thing that Marvel might not have allotted itself by making some interesting movie choices. I honestly think what they're suffering from is currently their cast outside of Loki is characters that people really aren't deeply invested in, and actors they're not deeply invested in, where like, oh, Thor is a big name. Captain America is a big name. You know who is not the biggest name? I mean, we know that she's important, but Carol Danvers. I really did not know much about Carol before Captain Marvel came out. And so, like, currently, Thor is in flux because people had mixed reviews on Love and Thunder. Where, like, if that had knocked it out of the park, I think that we might have a little bit more fan support and grace. But right now, outside of your original in-game crew, you don't really have much of the originals. Like, and you don't have the investment yet. It takes time, and time is something they're lacking.
Do you know how many projects there were in the first two phases?
Like 7.
No, please tell me.
There were 12.
Oh, I was
12
close.
projects. That encompassed 8 years. 8 years of projects. Do you know how many projects they have in the last 2 years? It's more than 8. Okay? So while I hear what you're saying, and I agree on a level, I will say they have changed the rules of their own game because maybe there's just too much content. If you're going to come out on stage and announce that this is the Multiverse Saga, and then you're going to give us 20 different types of content, then I think there should be some connection. Now.
So this kind of goes to what Bob Iger said.
Yeah.
That due to the pandemic, Disney felt the need to put out a ton of material. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily quality. And so there is such a thing as too much.
Now, my disclaimer on all of that is that I'm a comic book nerd. I'm a comic book nerd, and thus I'm coming from a place. This doesn't mean I don't like Marvel. I love Marvel. I love that they're making movies of this. I understand it has to be a little different than the comic book sensibilities. I get all that, and I'm super grateful and thankful they continue to make this sort of content. I'm not like off the bandwagon. I loved this season of Loki. I loved this episode of Loki, but I'm trying to describe to you the warring feelings going on inside me that were present after Multiverse of Madness, and I couldn't really put them into words, and now I can.
Yeah, I don't see any issue after Multiverse of Madness.
You're a DC guy.
And they have a time story,
Okay.
a big one. Like
Yeah, and they
the
were,
Flash
and it was
Paradox.
trash when they did it too. The movies,
The
Flash
animated movie? No.
The Flash movie-
animated is epic.
Okay, I'm not talking about animation. I'm talking about the most recent attempt by Warner Brothers to do Flashpoint, and it was trash.
Well,
So
No,
look,
no.
of course you have no problems with Marvel. You're like, oh, this is all right.
no.
You've
like,
been conditioned to accept trash.
See, that
Warner Brothers completely scrapped what the original plan was of that director and of the showrunner, the series runner, the Kevin Feige, which was Zack Snyder. They got rid of Snyder. So, like, if you alter who's running it, you're going to, and you altered the director's cut because the Anthony Muschietti has said several times, this is different than what I had planned. And now it's also in a lame duck period.
Yeah.
So
Yes, there are details. My point wasn't to get off track with DC. Here's one last disclaimer. Scotty messaged us something yesterday where he said, I'm excited for the Marvels because not every movie out has to be Citizen Kane, which is sort of a subtle attempt to say, like you're being overcritical.
burn.
To which my response is, no, critique is fair. Critique is fair, especially given Marvel's history, especially since I know they're capable
not
of
Marvel's
doing this.
history, Disney's.
Yeah,
I would-
Well, right. They're capable, and that's the only reason I bring this up. Am I happy with Loki? Yes. And if I'll just start the ratings. This episode's a 9 out of 10 for me. It's fantastic. It's a wonderful episode. As an episode, it's a wonderful into this narrative loop of Loki's story, which is wonderful. It's the best Disney Plus content ever. And so I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. But I have disappointment too. And that's where I'll leave it.
Okay.
I'll go 9.9.
Wow.
See, and
No, it nailed it. Nailed it. Hit it out of the park. It had like tremendous stakes.
Okay.
It had tremendous acting. It had way better graphics than anything I have seen in most recent Disney Marvel movies. So
All of that is true.
I am here for it. I will support it. I will give it my seal of approval as a near perfect offering.
Matthew Von Bogle, what is your rating?
10 out of 10.
10 out
I
of
give
10.
it 10 out of 10.
All right.
And I had it written in my notes at the bottom, 10 out of 10.
He did. I will report that you can't see, but I will report he did. 10 out of 10. Okay. I don't disagree. I hope we get more Loki. I assume we are getting more Loki.
I'm excited.
I assume. Last question, real quick, because we've gone long already.
We have.
The final question, the big question: does Loki replace Kang as the instigator of Secret Wars now? Are they writing Loki out, or not Loki? Are they writing Jonathan Majors out of their plans? They can't fully.
I was going to say, I think Kang's still going to be a big element.
You have to write him out completely at some point. You have to figure out a way to get him out. But is this the open door?
I think that this is the catalyst for that. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's an open door.
Yeah. Yeah, and we know Marvel makes late decisions, so I think they're just leaving the door open here and waiting, biding their time. Because I think they think what all of us see, which is Jonathan Majors is an elite talent, and they don't want to get rid of him if it's unnecessary. Now you can debate on whether or not we've crossed that threshold or not. We've crossed the threshold.
A court date will tell us.
Yeah. Although, just because someone's not guilty doesn't mean he's a great dude either.
Right.
Like he just because he's not guilty of breaking the law doesn't mean he's
Well,
not a user of other people instead of a lover of other people.
But he
right?
may be found not guilty in this, but a lot of stuff may come out that taints him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or opposite. We don't know.
Yeah.
We
So
really don't.
they're waiting, I think, which is, we won't be the quick to judge type people you see on social media. We'll say, hey, that's probably good due diligence. Just wait, see how it plays out, and then make your decision based on if you want someone of his character, the way it plays out in the trial, what we learn about him, if it does. But they've got the door open here to write out Kang if they want to, which will be super disappointing because I like Kang as a character.
Can I say one more thing?
One more thing from Matt Bogle.
I have always thought of myself as a pessimist in life. And watching you from a distance, Dave, I'm like, he's an optimist. This just flipped. I'm being the optimist here, and you were the pessimist today. So
I just, when it comes to comics, man, I'm super grateful and thankful that we live in a time where they make this stuff. Did they flame out too early? Because the Infinity Saga is amazing. I loved every bit of the Infinity Saga. There was no movie in the first 20 some movies that I was disappointed with. Not one.
Its name was Thor 2.
I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed going to the theater and seeing Thor Dark World. I just haven't rewatched it.
Don't do it.
I've rewatched every other MCU movie, but not that one. So, yeah. What'd you guys think of Loki season 2 and the last episode? What do you think of Loki, God of Stories, Loki, Avenger Prime, any of the things they're drawing from to complete this story? Tell us what you thought in the social media posts for this episode, and make sure to subscribe. Share this episode if you thought it was interesting, thought our breakdown was good. Share this with your other peeps. And say if you want a good recap of Loki, here it is. We'll see you next time.